Good day. I would like to welcome everyone and glad that you can be here. Um, During the event, would you, apart from the awardees, would you please mute yourself and turn off your video? My name is David Douglas, and I want to introduce now my sister, Ann Douglas Cornell, to give some background on the Pearl Award and its support of environmental justice and health and sustainability. Annie?
Thanks, David. Um, I am often asked how we select the recipients and why the award was established. And because it's not an application process, it was created to honor my parents, my father, who believed that a strong economy was the key to a successful society, and my mother, who believed that there is no issue more critical than the protection of environmental resources for the health of all communities. Over the years, it was and is clear that having a strong economy and ensuring an individual's rights to clean air and water must be compatible, not competing goals. It is named the Pearl Award after friends stated that the individuals and organizations to which we give sound like pearls. Their work is laborious, change is incremental, and they are often met with friction, but they are determined, fearless, and hold fast to the vision that all of us must think of the health not only of this generation, but of future generations. They are willing to accept that often their goals are reached in small steps through the power of the force of the law and the written word. They affect change. Progress may not be seismic at the time, but their impacts can be powerful. It is their message that the air we breathe in Pennsylvania, the water we drink in Flint, Michigan, and Alabama, and the earth resources we extract for our survival do not have boundaries. Our future existence depends on each of us respecting that they're inextricably connected. I'd like to ask David at this time to introduce the extraordinary recipients of the 2020 Jean and Leslie Douglas Pearl Award.
Thank you, Annie. The Cornell Douglas Foundation asked me to do this not only because my rates are cheap, but because I'm personally delighted to be in the same Zoom room with those who've dedicated their lives to the protection of the environment and public health at a time of unprecedented threats to both. As the Cornell Douglas Foundation has grown over time, so has the award level. And this year, in addition to the original glass sculpture that each organization received, those selected by the foundation's advisors, those organizations received a $100,000 check. As everyone knows by now, the three awardees are Frac Tracker Alliance, Earthworks, and the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice. Many of you are already familiar with one or more of these awardees, but collectively they have a fierce intent to provide a voice for the most vulnerable in our society. Another common thread, of course, is these organizations' perseverance and not infrequently their courage. Time is short this evening. It's a 1-hour event, and each speaker could speak eloquently on these topics as they have agreed to limit their remarks, giving very brief answers to questions to allow time for other awardees to speak and some time remaining for questions, which you're welcome to send on via the chat box. There'll be time to get to a few before we break for the evening. The event is being recorded and will be available for later viewing. The Cornell Douglas Foundation asked each organization to send on a brief video describing the organization's work, and we'll begin with Frac Track Alliance, then go to Earthworks, and then the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice. Each very brief video will be followed by the representative from that foundation speaking just for about 3 minutes and answering just the same single question, and this is that question. When Americans are asked by pollsters to rank issues they would like elected issues to prioritize, the environment rarely makes the top 5 or top 10. Can you mention one specific way that your organization is working to ensure that the environment becomes more of a priority for everyone. And the video from Frac Tracker Alliance will lead us off. And Lindsay, can you begin that video?
I'm Brooke Lenker, Director of Frac Tracker Alliance. Since 2010, Frac Tracker's insights have empowered action to confront the harms of oil, gas, and petrochemical development. We started as a web-based tool at the University of Pittsburgh and grew into a nonprofit organization seeking to advance a just energy future through our work. Today, 8 staff in 5 locations across the country map the footprint and risks of extraction, analyze complex data, and write substantively about paramount energy issues. This and all our research and documentation furthers noble goals: stopping fossil fuel activities and infrastructure, increasing public understanding of its detriments, protecting communities and ecosystems, and strengthening alliances fighting for cleaner, safer energy solutions. Our relentless work is making a difference. We helped set in motion a months-long fracking ban in California and helped catalyze and record the movement for a fracking ban in New York State. In California, Colorado, and Pennsylvania, we're supporting movements for larger setbacks from oil and gas drilling to protect public health. On the Gulf Coast and in Appalachia, our involvement with the Break Free from Plastics U.S. Coalition creates synergies of resistance. From addressing the industry's toxic waste legacy in the Ohio River Valley to examining the dangers of moving liquefied natural gas by truck and rail to the Delaware River, Frac Tracker is a trusted partner. Each year, aiding dozens of organizations, locally, regionally, and nationally. Meanwhile, our website has logged over 1.5 million visitors, and our findings and visualizations are used by activists, researchers, and news media worldwide. From drones and apps and other technical tools to information shared, relationships forged. We're passionate about what we do. We are humbled and grateful to be chosen as a recipient of this year's Pearl Award. On behalf of all of us at Frac Tracker, please accept our gracious thanks.
Brooke, thank you for that. Before becoming executive director at Frac Tracker Alliance, you work with Pennsylvania's Department of Conservation, Natural Resources, and also with the Alliance for Chesapeake Bay. But now as executive director of Frac Tracker Alliance, could you take 3 minutes to mention one specific way that Frac Tracker is working to ensure that the environment becomes more of a priority for everyone? And you need to unmute yourself there, I think.
Okay, thank you, David, and thank you everyone that is involved in this tremendous award. So Frac Tracker is really concerned about raising awareness around environmental issues, and especially oil and gas development and related things like the plastics build out. So we're best known for our work with mapping and analysis, but data doesn't always speak to everyone, nor do visualizations in the form of maps. Mm-hmm. So we're really excited about doing more multimedia work. So if I had to encapsulate some of our new work to build a bigger tent on environmental issues, I'd say it's our multimedia work. And specifically, we're doing podcasts based on audio stories that we've been collecting and will continue to collect from frontline communities, because nothing says it like hearing the words and the stories of people that have been impacted by extraction or by pipelines or other development. And another example of this multimedia framework are images and videos that we've collected on the ground and up in the air, via drone, via overflight, often with a partner, Lighthawk. And we've assembled this into a new multimedia library based on a Flickr platform that is being used by activists and journalists. And we're going to expand that over time, and it's searchable by geography and issue. So we're really excited about that. We're really excited about these podcasts and audio stories. And we know that working with our partners near and far, we can really share this information and, again, broaden awareness and understanding of these critical issues.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Brooke. I think Project Lighthawk had its birth or origin down in New Mexico years ago. I'm not sure. Where I lived, still live. I'm speaking tonight from Boston, but thank you for that. Sure. The next video comes from Earthworks. And Lindsay, could you begin that video?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Krill, and I'm the Executive Director of Earthworks. We've worked to protect communities and the environment from the impacts of irresponsible mining, drilling, and fracking. Earthworks is the only national group that focuses exclusively on preventing the destructive impacts of the extraction of oil, gas, and minerals like gold, copper, and uranium. Mining and drilling wreak havoc on our environment. Hard rock mining is the nation's largest toxic polluter, dumping millions of pounds of dangerous chemicals into our land, water, and air each year. Oil and gas are being drilled and fracked in more than 34 states, exposing nearby residents to dangerous air emissions and water pollution. Another thing that makes Earthworks unique is our commitment to empower people directly affected by drilling and mining to take action to protect their communities. We educate people about the impacts of extraction and show them how they can secure their health, clean air, and water.
Directly behind us is a giant well. We just got notice that they're fracking 4 more wells on that. To the right of us is another well that we look out our window and see. We have 2 compressor stations within a 2-mile radius of our house. We have a pipeline on our property. Just a lot.
Among the Ponca Nation, we've had our wells and tanks tested by Earthworks and found that within a 5-mile radius, we've had 30 out of 30 leaking, we believe, methane gas.
We seek to change the rules of the game for the oil, gas, and mining industries in the U.S. and around the world. Earthworks promotes stronger enforcement of existing laws and regulations, and we advocate for tough new rules to protect land, air, water, and communities. We also campaign to protect special places from mining and drilling, such as critical wildlands, sensitive ecosystems, and communities that do not want development in their backyards. To accomplish our goals, we work at every level, from the kitchen table to the halls of Congress to the corporate boardroom. When we talk about the impacts of oil and gas development or hard rock mining, we're often playing defense. We know what the options are and where sustainable solutions can take us. I invite you to join us and secure a better, cleaner future.
Thank you, Jennifer. Speaking to us tonight from Berkeley, I think, California. Before you became executive director of Earthworks about 10 years ago, I think you worked for Rainforest Alliance. But speaking tonight as head of Earthworks, what one specific effort would you focus on that Earthworks is trying to do to raise the attention of the public to the environment?
Thank you so much, David, and thank you so much to the Cornell Douglas Foundation. This is quite an honor. And I wish we were all in person together right now because this is such a warm group that I'm looking at on my computer screen. So David, Earthworks' mission is to protect communities and the environment from the adverse impacts of oil and gas and mining. For the communities that we work with, the environment is the top priority because the environment is the water they drink. It's the air they breathe, and it's the health of their children. We are committed to telling their stories from these frontline communities because no one should have to live in a sacrifice zone with poisoned air and water. When we're successful, we elevate their stories to the national media and to regional media, and we show how the same pollution that is threatening our environment is putting the health of already disproportionately impacted communities at risk, leaving behind a legacy of waste that can harm future generations. By telling these stories, we help America and people around the world understand how important it is to hold polluters accountable, and that corporate profits should not come at the expense of polluting health, air, water, and the global climate. When people know about these harms, they cannot unknow.
Powerful sentence there, Jennifer. Thanks so much. So, we're glad tonight that Catherine Flowers has indeed been able to join us, even in the face of Hurricane Zeta, which should not strike until later tonight. So her power is still on, it looks like, for the time being. Catherine's heads the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice, and is its founding director. She and the center have helped focus attention on what most people would like to turn their attention away from, namely wastewater pollution, the failing or absence of septic tanks, the presence of diseases such as hookworm caused by that type of pollution. And for her success in bringing attention to the failing water and sanitation infrastructure in rural areas, and their role in perpetuating health problems and socioeconomic disparities. The MacArthur Foundation this month, I believe, awarded Catherine Flowers one of its Genius grants. So congratulations for that as well, Catherine. So, Catherine speaks about her personal involvement in the video that is coming up. Lindsay, could you cue that?
Hi, my name is Catherine Flowers. I'm the founding director of the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice. The environmental issue that I brought to the national forefront has been the lack of rural infrastructure for wastewater in communities throughout the United States. It is an appalling shame that in the wealthiest country in the world, we have a lot of people that are living without basic sanitation, that are straight piping as they flush their toilets is going out on top of the ground. And in addition to that, it's leading to parasites, tropical parasites, that one would normally see in developing nations. This is an atrocity, and also in the age of COVID, we found that it is even the kind of magnifier that is bringing to the forefront the healthcare disparities that exist in people that are living with those conditions. I have testified before Congress about this problem, gotten the UN involved, and more recently wrote a book entitled Waste, One Woman's Fight Against America's Dirty Secret. So in order, I think the issue that should be at the top of everybody's mind when they go to the polls to vote is whether or not you're voting for candidates that will make sure that everybody has access to water and sanitation in this country. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Catherine. That's music to my ears. I've spent the last 35 years working for water and sanitation issues internationally. So could you take 3 minutes now just to speak briefly about what the center is doing specifically to try to raise the level of attention, prioritizing this issue in the American public's mind?
First thing, thank you. Thank you for recognizing the work that we're doing here. And I really stand on the shoulders of all the grassroots people that are living in Lowndes County who allowed me to be able to bring their story to the national attention. But what it has done, what we've done and been, I think, successful at is having people talk about wastewater and to take away the shame of talking about wastewater. Wastewater, raw sewage is something that all of us deal with.
Yeah.
The question is whether or not we have the infrastructure that works. And being today, you know, being part of this ceremony and one eye on what the hurricane is doing on the Gulf, kind of help to underscore the importance of having sustainable wastewater infrastructure. And as we move toward a green economy, we have to also start thinking about green wastewater infrastructure. And that's one of the things that we're going to be pushing for, the development of new technologies to address wastewater, because as people have to move away from the coast, and we've seen this year the onslaught again and again and again of tropical storms coming off the Gulf. I can assure you that next week or before the end of this week, I'll start getting phone calls from people who have failing wastewater systems where the sewage is going to be coming back into their homes. And this is the issue that we need to address. I think that we have the ability to address it here in the United States of America, but it's a global issue. But I think this is one issue that we can lead on. And the center is going to hopefully be part of the leader in inspiring people to do that.
Excellent. And I think it is inevitable in the next year. I would bet that there is a strong infrastructure push for water and sanitation, and the I think it's $1 billion per year shortfall in infrastructure that the U.S. is facing every year. So thank you for your work, and thank you all for your comments on those tonight. There's several questions, if we could get to them now, and I'll ask a few individual ones, and then we could maybe do some more collective ones later. The first one would be for Brooke. In light of the recent political focus on whether Joe Biden opposes fracking or supports fracking, have you noticed an uptick in web traffic or direct inquiries to you by the media about the impact of fracking?
Good question, David. We have seen or taken in some requests for our perspective on Vice President Biden's statements, and we've also tried to put out some content that addresses our perspective on that as well.
There's a question in the chat box that just came in. Are you disappointed in Biden's stand on fracking? And what do you expect in a Biden administration? If you could just mention that very briefly.
Sure. I would say we're disappointed, but we're not surprised. We understand the politics of Pennsylvania and this issue overall. I think we remain optimistic that if there's a President Biden, that there would be a receptivity to embracing some of the concerns and positions and actions that our movement has, would like to see.
A question for Jennifer, if we could. Have you seen greater engagement in your work in light of the momentum put forward by Black Lives Matter and other social justice movements? Oh, I think you're still muted there, Jennifer.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but not for long. I want to first answer the earlier question about Vice President Biden's position on fracking, if you don't mind. I think we have I think it's clear that there is work that we can do with a Biden administration that we cannot do with the current administration. And at the same time, it's clear that we have a long way to go to educate our political leaders of both parties about the impacts of about climate change, about the impacts of our energy policy on perpetuating climate change, on the impacts of pollution on the health of frontline communities. And our perspective is fairly straightforward. Climate leaders don't frack, which means Biden's got a long way to go. And it's clear that there's work that we can do with the Biden administration that we cannot do with the current administration. So we're ready to roll up our sleeves and get to that work. When it comes to frontline communities, and the question that you asked regarding Black Lives Matter, yes, absolutely. There's a sad reality in America of environmental racism that accompanies corporate power and corporate pollution, and that also accompanies systemic oppression and systemic racism generally. These facilities, the worst polluting facilities, are historically disproportionately sited in communities of color. And that means that the brunt of the pollution is borne by those communities of color on the front lines. And if we're going to have justice in the transition away from fossil fuels, that's got to change.
Great, great. Thank you, Jennifer, on that. Question for Catherine, if we could. What is the most successful way that you've found to engage people who are not directly affected themselves to support advocacy for adequate water and wastewater treatment systems in rural Alabama and underserved rural communities?
The most successful method that we've used is actually taking people to see it. I think that oftentimes if people have an urban perspective, they don't understand what it's like to be in a rural community. And oftentimes when I talk about this, even when I talk with journalists about this, they ask, well, why can they connect to the city sewer? But a lot of these places aren't in cities. They're in unincorporated areas. And most of the US is unincorporated. Most people live in cities. And I think that the urban perspective sometimes color what people see, but when they go and they see it firsthand and they actually see straight piping and see the pipe running out of the house and the pit with the raw sewage in it, and maybe the eyes of a frog peeping out from under it, I think that's something that they'll never forget. So we've been very successful at taking not just philanthropists, but also politicians like Senator Cory Booker. We've taken Senator Bernie Sanders and others to actually see this firsthand, and they have become allies in fighting to change this situation.
One of the things I've noticed over time on Capitol Hill is that water and wastewater is one of the rare bipartisan issues that cross the aisle, and long may that continue to flourish. A lobbyist friend says that the phrase should be, politics stops not at the water's edge, but politics stops at water. So, Catherine, on to you. One more question, and then we'll go back to a question for Jennifer and for Brooke. Your new book is coming out. Do you happen to have a copy right there, or right there to show to people the cover?
Yes, I do.
And the subtitle, if people can't see it, is, can you say the subtitle?
Is One Woman's Fight Against America's Dirty Secret.
Great. I just ordered it on Amazon, or pre-ordered it. It's not quite available. When is it actually going to be available?
It'll be available on November 17th. It's already in the warehouse, and they'll be sending it out. People that ordered on Kindle will have access to it on that date. But otherwise, the hard copy would be available be going out on the 17th.
And what would you say, what is the one thing, when people put down that book at the end of reading it, what's the one thing that you want them to have come away with?
I want them to come away with how climate change, racial justice, environmental justice, social justice, how all of that intersects. I think that the story is my story, but it's the intersectionality of all of that. And I started out doing economic development, but I found out I couldn't really do economic development in a rural county that didn't have infrastructure. And certainly we didn't have the basic infrastructure. And why was it that the policy at that time was criminalizing people who couldn't afford it, criminalizing poverty? So what it does, it shows a lot of bipartisanship that, now it's kind of hard to believe that, that was not that very long ago, but it shows that there were people on both sides of the aisle, as you mentioned earlier, that were working with us on finding solutions. And again, that this is one issue that should be bipartisan. It shouldn't matter which party you're in, because we all use the bathroom. We all have to have water to live.
Yeah. I remember one of the most conservative members of Congress came on board supporting international water when he heard, he was a kind of a conservative hanging judge from down in Texas, and he learned that women, when they were gathering water in developing countries, oftentimes faced being attacked late at night for when they were gathering water. And that so outraged him that anybody could be attacked gathering water, brought him as a conservative Republican to join the most progressive Democrat in Congress to sponsor legislation. But each person, once they understand the source, as you said, and once they see it, once they understand it, and we've been so insulated in our country, or so many people in our country have been insulated from the problems of this issue, that it's very sobering about what's coming around the corner that will be facing us. Brooke, if we could go back to you for a question. Frac Tracker Alliance aids, as you mentioned before, dozens of organizations have come to you with your impressive resources that you offer. Are you seeing, speaking of international issues, are you seeing more requests coming in from international organizations than you've ever seen in the past as well?
Well, lately I have not, but I will say that we're part of networks that work globally, and it's really encouraging to see all the amazing work that's going on all around the globe on these issues, whether it's plastics or whether it's oil production or the financial side of things. I mean, really hitting it from every angle, and that's happening in Europe, it's happening in Latin America, it's happening in the United States, writ large. So we're encumbering the industry, the fossil fuel industry writ large, in every way conceivable, and we're seeing success. As Jennifer said, we have a lot more work to do, but it is certainly encouraging to see how projects have been abandoned and how the industry is losing money, in part because of the successful tactics of various organizations.
Great, thanks. So, Jennifer, a question, if we could, about the 1872, and it sounds like something, for those people unfamiliar with it, it sounds like something that belongs, very much in dusty history books, but it very much still governs hard rock mining in the public domain, federal public domain. So I know a lot of issues will be dependent upon what happens next week, but what do you see is the potential for dealing with that very antiquated act that has been controlling extraction for 150 years?
Well, it is as antiquated as you say. The 1872 mining law was signed by President Ulysses S. Grant, David, actually. And it was passed at a time when there was an encouragement for settlement of the West. There was also, it was concurrent with the robbing of the indigenous peoples of Americas from their lands, and it is a continued way to rob the public of the rights to control what happens on public lands. Because of the 1872 mining law, it is impossible for federal government agencies when claims are staked on public lands to say no. They have to allow that mining claim to exist, and that forces us in the public interest into the realm of of using environmental policies such as NEPA, which the Trump administration has also been working against, working to gut, and litigation when it comes down to it, in order to prevent mines from happening where they don't belong, where mines might permanently harm water, or where mines might destroy the livelihood of communities, or where mines are proposed on sacred lands and landscapes. So we feel like a top priority for the sake of public lands is reforming the 1872 mining law, creating a pathway to cleaning up abandoned mines across the United States. Right now, about 50% of watersheds west of the Mississippi are polluted by mine waste, and that needs to be cleaned up. And bringing some justice and some integrity to the mining industry.
Great, thank you for that. There's a question for all three of you, if you could each take a minute to answer from Will about how to get young people more involved, specifically young people. He said he didn't want any of us to think that we were necessarily old, but how to get more younger people involved in the environment, in these issues. He's heard Brooke. He said, Brooke, you spoke to a group of students that he brought together, or young people that he brought together. But just a question for all three of you. See, Catherine, do you want to go first on that? Just take a minute, say, how do you get young people more involved?
Well, I've been able to get young people involved by speaking at universities, getting them to get engaged and come to Lowndes County and work with us. And a lot of those young people have actually changed their career choices based on their engagement with local people and seeing the problem so they can be part of the solution. But I feel that, you know, in order to bring about the change that need to happen, young people have to be at the forefront of that.
Brooke? Jennifer? Brooke, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. I would say certainly engaging youth, you know, where they are in the schools, in the colleges, and bringing them into the conversations on these issues. They are very concerned, as we know, about them, and they have really good ideas. And I think it's important to give them whatever tools and resources they need to act on campus, in their communities. They have a lot of ingenuity, a lot of energy to affect change. And it's really encouraging to see evidence of that in terms of some of the coalitions and their engagement in those, in their work. There's a US and global Break Free from Plastics Coalition. You see a lot of youth involvement there. So I think we just got to keep nurturing that in various ways, and expand even youth involvement, even though it's already robust.
Jennifer?
Yeah, what Catherine and Brooke said. And also, in a lot of our work now, the young people are the leaders. They're pushing us further than we have dared to go before. They're insisting on intersectional justice. They're insisting on strong climate action. They're impatient and frustrated with all of the work that's been left undone. Mm-hmm. They're going to live with the legacy of these impacts. So when we're taking action that seems like it is politically feasible from an analysis of who we know in Congress today, we're hearing from young people, sorry, that's not enough. We have to change the definition of what is politically feasible, because we can't live another generation with these impacts, with this legacy.
One question that's obviously still to be answered here is, what has been the impact of COVID-19 has devastated a lot of the U.S. economy. What's been the impact of the pandemic on your all's organization, on the finances, particularly of your all's organizations? Has it stayed steady? Has it declined? Possibly increased? Catherine, do you want to go first?
Yes. Well, I think that, you know, I'm not really sure You know, our organization as it stands now was reorganized. We had the Alabama Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice. And in October of last year, we decided to go nationwide and we organized the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice. Because of COVID, I think that some organizations have looked to us. We haven't gone out to actually seek a lot of financial support because of COVID. And also the county that I'm working in, people are aware that at one point it had the highest per capita death rate and infection rate in the state of Alabama. So I think that we're going to, what has happened, the focus is changing in terms of these organizations. A lot of organizations are focusing more on environmental health and wellness at a time when they weren't doing it a year ago. So that's one of the changes that I've seen. And in terms of whether or not we'll be able to continue to raise funds, I think that we'll be able to do more once we can travel and people can come and actually see firsthand.
Right. So, Jennifer, what's been the impact on you all by COVID on finances of the Earthworks?
You know, for Earthworks, we've been in a fairly fortunate position, and we know that it's a very fortunate position. Our financial situation is okay, and yet we're nervous about the impacts of COVID on the larger economy. Mm-hmm. Part of why our financial system is okay is that I think a lot of our allies and our supporters realized from the last economic downturn that that turning inward and focusing on economics when environmental pollution and climate impacts are still going on, climate impacts aren't stopping, and a lot of folks who we work with are anxious that we double down, that we stay on the job of exposing these impacts and holding these polluters accountable.
Right. Brooke? So.
Yeah, and I would ditto a lot of what Jennifer said. I think Frac Tracker has experienced similar, I guess, consistency, and we too are very fortunate and appreciative that we haven't seen a real drop off in support. I mean, there have been some bumps in the road for sure, and I think the operative word for us is uncertainty. We know that, well, we're not out of this COVID crisis yet, not by a long shot. We know that the future is to be determined. So we're taking it kind of, one month, 1 year at a time, and are grateful for the support that's come in, and know that there are no guarantees, but we'll just be transparent and energetic in our work, and hope that the resources will follow to enable that work.
Great, thank you. Catherine, someone Annie and I know very well has just asked the question about, are there any documentaries that have been done on wastewater that include the issues of social and racial justice?
I haven't seen any yet. However, the one video is a small documentary that we did that made the environmental film festival circuit, called The Accidental Environmentalist Catherine Flowers, but it went to Lowndes County. It was actually done by students in conjunction with the Southern Exposure and the Alabama Rivers Alliance. Mm-hmm. And we went to Lowndes County and interviewed people and talked about the history of Lowndes County and how it all connected to the issue that we were having. But I think in terms of a broader film, I think that film has yet to be made.
Well, the person who asked the question is a documentary film producer, so that it's good. I'm glad we could get to that. Jay Feldman has a question here for Jennifer and Brooke. How do you frame your work in the context of alternatives to the polluting industries? How do you frame your work in the context of alternatives to the polluting industries? Which of you want to take that on first?
Go ahead, Brooke.
Certainly. I think, admittedly, we focus a lot on the dark side of these issues. And we recently completed a strategic plan where we very intently made a conscious effort to include more focus on solutions and lifting up great examples from communities across the country of what's possible, what's succeeding, and how are renewables and energy efficiency and all the solutions being embraced. So that's something that we've done a little bit of, but we have every intent to do a lot more, and we want to sort of celebrate those successes and know that there's this great power of example that can be transferred when people see what other communities are doing.
Jennifer?
Yeah, as Brooke indicated, yeah, when we're working on oil and gas issues, we can certainly talk about the solutions to fossil fuels being renewable energy alternatives. At Earthworks, we also work on mining, and we know that in order to have renewable energy, we're going to have more mined minerals. We were curious about how much so that we could say that's enough. Because if you listen to the mining industry and their proponents in Congress, the folks who like the 1872 mining law, what you hear is we need it all. And we knew that wasn't the answer. So we commissioned a study and we said, if we achieve a 100% renewable energy economy, what minerals are we going to be consuming that we could recycle instead of mine new minerals? And where should we be worried really about that mining impact? We found that there are 4 minerals of serious concern: lithium, cobalt, nickel, and copper. And that's because if we transition every car to an electric car, if we minimize cars and transition more to mass transit and bike transit, if we transition all coal and natural gas electricity to renewables, we said this is how much of these minerals we're going to need, and now that's going to be enough. We call that program Making Clean Energy Clean, Just, and Equitable. We're working with activists on the front lines of mining around the world, particularly focused on those 4 minerals. And we're working to incorporate the renewable energy industry into this program to make sure that people who we believe and who sometimes we are a part of understand that we can't go pushing mining impacts from one place to another. We have a limited amount of water and air on this earth, and we need to use these resources respectfully and carefully. So our demand is that we maximize recyclability while minimizing toxicity for renewable energy. If new mining must be done for some of these minerals, it must achieve the best social and environmental performance. We advocate a system called the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance, which is the strongest, most robust standard for mining. And if we're going to build a new energy economy, let's change the system. Let's not assume that everybody is going to get access to a car for long commutes. Let's instead think about what a climate-constrained transportation and energy economy really looks like.
We need to move on to some other questions, but very quickly, Jennifer, a question just came in. Is Earthworks also monitoring developments in deep sea floor mining?
Yes, we are. And actually the system I just mentioned, IRMA, does not allow for deep seabed mining. And we're tracking the developments with seabed mining in the Pacific and in the Atlantic seafloors very, very closely. And working with communities that are fighting seabed mining, as well as communities that are fighting the dumping of terrestrial mine waste into the ocean. The ocean is seriously at risk with these mining booms, and it's something that a trend that I think we have to stop before it starts.
And I know time is drawing near here where we need to break. Could we, given the election just around the corner though, next week, probably the most important election in my life, and most of our lives, can you just think for a brief minute, if we could do a quick question here on if you had an elevator speech, was it 30 seconds in a typical elevator, the classic, how do you summarize something like this? But if you had you have an elevator speech to give to the incoming president, and I know this kind of depends on who the incoming president is, but you can answer it either way or just choose one option there. But if you had an elevator speech to deliver to the incoming president of one task that you would have them take up in their first 100 days, what would that be? What would that elevator speech say? Catherine, do you want to give a thought on that?
Well, I'll try. I think that it would not just be one thing, but it would be a concept. I would say that please employ the 7th generation principle, knowing that whatever you do will impact 7 generations to come.
Okay, Brooke, what would you? That was only like a couple floors of the elevator, Catherine. So. Brooke, how about you?
Well, some of these elevators move pretty quickly. So,
that's true.
I guess I would say invest in people and the planet, and you can do that. But you can do both of them at the same time. We have to give people opportunity, and there's opportunity in building a sustainable economy. So I would just try to emphasize that as best I could, and I'd probably practice a little bit more too.
Jennifer, you want to bring us home here?
Sure. The economy of the next generation will be built on the just and equitable transition away from fossil fuels and towards just and equitable renewable energy. There should be no more sacrifice zones. We should not be leaving anyone behind. So let's look at where we have been leaving people behind in previous generations, and let's correct that problem.
Great, thank you. Thank you for landing that plane. So as we're coming to an end here, I'd like to thank my colleague at Global Water 2020, Lindsay Denny, who's been in the Zoom cockpit. As those of you who know Lindsay, she could run small countries, and it's been delightful working with her, as our group is now the largest group in the world working to get water, sanitation, and hygiene to healthcare facilities in developing countries. Half of all hospitals and clinics in developing countries, meaning maternity rooms as well, lack water, sanitation, and hygiene. And I lastly want to thank particularly Cynthia Duffy, Executive Director of the Cornell Douglas Foundation, who helps to oversee the Pearl Award, and also the advisory committee to the Pearl Award, for helping to make these organizations more visible. You all do such great work in making hidden pollution visible, and you also make visible, I think, the communities who suffer normally out of sight, the hidden costs and the consequences of such pollution. And now, as we draw to a close here, back to a wonderful person. She didn't make me say that, by the way. Back to a wonderful person who had the vision to create the Pearl Award in the first place, Ann Douglas Cornell.
Thank you, Jamin, but I have to thank you so much for being the best MC, master of ceremonies that I know of. And the Zoom master, Lindsay, you took my words away, but I'd say not small countries, large countries, just for large countries. She is just extraordinary. And I also want to thank Michelle Rubin, who designed the glass award, which we don't have, but Cindy Jones for the gorgeous photographs, which she's allowed me to use both on the invitation as well as on the website. And I really, really thank Jennifer and Brooke and Catherine for the astounding vision and passion that you all have. And even sidelined within 4 walls of a house, which you all have been for quite some time, you're unstoppable. And the work and the impacts that you have will be everlasting. So thank you all for this. And thank everyone who is attending, whom I don't know where you are out there in the big wide world, but thank you for attending and for celebrating. And I really hope we can't get together. I usually at this point say, please eat and drink, because we're at the press club normally, but I urge you all to find some beverage of choice, raise a glass of whatever champagne, Prosecco you might have, and celebrate our wonderful recipients. So thank you all.